10 million people worldwide are stateless. 3 million of them are children. They have no official identity or citizenship and are therefore invisible to society.
It would mean that there is absolutely no country in the entire world who will recognize somebody to be their citizen. So they are effectively without a state.
There are no reliable statistics on how many stateless people are living in South Africa. They are either political refugees or descendants of those who left their countries in search of a better life. In this week's episode, Special Assignment tells the harrowing stories of people living in the shadows within our borders. This is the Mozambican-South African border, where many crossed illegally in the 70s and 80s, fleeing civil war. Next to it is the village of Belfast in Mpumalanga, also a few kilometers from the buzzing Kruger National Park. A high number of Mozambican nationals live here in abject poverty due to circumstances beyond their control. 30-year-old Thembi Pelembe's parents fled Mozambique in 1984 during the country's civil war, which saw over 1 million people perish. Thembi's parents were lucky to escape with their lives, but life in South Africa was not easy. She says she had to drop out of school because her parents were very poor.
Ngene xikolo primary ni hetelela secondary ndineka ka 7 timhaka ta ku kala mali ku badala xikolo fees na uniform swi boheka swa ku tshama na mhakhi no mi tirhela se kumeka se ni nga yi exikolweni se ni famba ni khomakhoma exikoropo.
But even more pressing is Thembi's inability to make a sustainable living because she is stateless. She was born 2 years after her parents came to South Africa, but they did not register her birth, apparently because they feared deportation.
Vatswari va me va ta le Mozambique fike 84 tina mhla nga ri na mapasi se xivangelo xa vona nga ri na pasi timhaka ta ku veni vo a va nga ri na pasi kumeka na mina nga kumi ku humelela until sweswi ni se va loyi va ni siya va nga ri na wona na mina nga ri na rona se a ri na plan leyi faneke ni endla ka sweswi ku ze ni kumile ku ni pfuneka na mina ni mapasi ene mi swa ni vava timhaka ta ku ni bebulele la ni wala a ni wala handle mara na ID.
Had Thembi not dropped out of school, she would in any event not have been able to matriculate. Without an ID, she cannot access basic services like healthcare, social security, and legitimate employment. As a result, she and her 3 children face a bleak future.
Na vana va 3. N'wana wa 2006, n'wana wa 2011, n'wana wa 2014. A va na munhu wa ku va hlayisa no ti hlayisela mina. Na hanya hi ku famba ni tirha evanhwini. Na sweswi ni khulumaka ni ve ntirhweni.
Like many in a similar situation, she had been scared to approach the Department of Home Affairs. Unless she does, she and her children will remain stateless until they die. Liesl Muller, from Lawyers for Human Rights, deals with many such cases. She explains how people become stateless.
Some people are born in one country and then also have links to other countries through their parents or through long residence. And this would sometimes mean that neither of those countries, or if there are more than 2 countries, none of the countries' law provides for them to be a citizen.
This leaves people like Thembi vulnerable to all kinds of exploitation because their perpetrators know that they are scared of being exposed and can therefore not open cases against them. Working informally as a domestic worker, she says she sometimes gets fired for no apparent reason.
Nje sweswi fikira ku hela nga a ni tirha kun'wana mintini va kumeke va ni yimisa na kumeka ni nga ri na plan ku ni nga kota ku xava swakudya ni yisa vana emahlweni.
She fears for the future of her children and has tried in the past to get relatives to organize birth certificates for them. But without any identity document, she cannot be assisted.
Nizamile kwenu kuma swanga kuma mapasi na se silweni tsamaka ne mara nga tsamla kaya isama evukatini bya ye se azamile kwenu loko ni ta va ni va bebula a ta ni endla leswaku va ta kuma certificate a swi kotekanga ti mata ku ensesi epasini ra ye i chadile va ka swi nge koteki na navela swa kona mehe va nga kuma mapasi va kote ku hlayiseka timhaka ta ku ku kula va nga ri na mapasi swa vava ni vona na mehe ni le ku hluphekeni ni famba ni tirhela vona laha kaya ni ti hanyisa hi 600 leyi ni yi tirhelaka hi vanhwini ni zame ku kulisa vona swa ku va kote ku vanhu va kula va ye mahlweni se ni nga tsaka loko va kuma ndlela ku humela va kuma certificate va ni mapasi loko a ni ri na ID ni hola penceni ya vana ni tshemba ku ri a fanele ku ni ku cinca la kaya a fanele ku nga ri so leswi nga xiswona na yindlu yin'wana kala ni faneke yi ri kona ni ta va hi ri kahle va ni vutomi bya kwena byi nandzika na hi va kahle nje hi vanhu loko u nga ri na ID nje hi mekelaka ID ka fika nkarhi wa ku veni va hola penceni loko va hole penceni vanhu va ye pencenini ku hambanahambana meni vanhu nga yanga epencenini loko va vuya ni yin'wana vana va mehe va buke leswaku na mina ni nga va ni ri na swin'wana leswi khomekaka nje hi vana van'wana mara ku vona ku ka swi nga koteki ti nga ri na ID kumbe ku ka swi nga humelelanga swilo leswi swi vava ngopfu ka vana va mene va kota ku xiyaxiya swilo leswi endlekaka hinkwako.
I don't know if I'm going to succeed, but I want you to tell us, who are these 3 people that you have opened corruption charges against at the Brooklyn police station? How senior are they?
Very.
Are these people who were serving in the political office of the executive mayor?
Yes.
Which means they are no longer working for the city now.
Well, I can tell you that one of them is actually finding themselves employed in another municipality.
You are not going to tell us the names?
No, you're not going to get names for me.
Are people still getting free Wi-Fi in Tshwane?
People are still getting free Wi-Fi, and we will actually make it one of the basic services that our residents will get.
Beautiful life in Cuba. We are from Camagüey. It's a central province. The biggest in extension is we were living by the beach, Santa Lucia Beach. And the reason I relocated to South Africa, I came as a part of the program. It's a civil engineering program exchange between South Africa and Cuba. And as part of the program, I was working in 2005 at the housing department, Western Cape province, here in Cape Town.
Ricardo, ¿le pongo los frijoles a esto? Kenya Maria Rodriguez and her husband settled in South Africa. But what do they miss most about Cuba?
Everything. Sorry. We miss the people, our culture, the music in the party. South African party is most about food than anything else. But I also like South African people. I think it's friendly. Cubans are very mixed. We are a mixture of local native people, the Red Indian people, but we are also a mixture of European, Spaniards, and African people. Then a Cuban is a mixture of everything. We fit very well with most of the community in South Africa without any problem. But of course, we miss our culture.
Kenya and her husband were unable to have children for many years, and when she found out she was pregnant, she was overjoyed.
Oh, it was amazing. We were married for more than 15 years and we couldn't have a child before. When I was already 40, I found out I was pregnant. And that was a little bit scary at the beginning because I didn't have a family structure. But anyhow, it was a beautiful news.
But once their baby was born, they were hit with shocking news that their child would not acquire Cuban citizenship.
Honestly, it was a shock. When Daniela was born, we got the paper, we did the manual registration of the birth at Home Affairs, and with that paper I went directly to the Cuban embassy. For me, she's Cuban more than anything, because the father and me both are Cuban. And I was shocked, because the reply was, she cannot be Cuban because you and your husband both left Cuba permanently.
Disappointed, she still had hope that her child would at least be granted South African citizenship since she was born in this country.
I said, okay, then she's going to be South Africa. But my first intention was to make Daniela Cuban, because we are both Cuban. When I went to the South African Home Affairs Department, but they say, no, but she cannot be Cuban. She cannot be South African either. And I said, but how that can be possible? She was born here. I said, yeah, but you don't have permanent resident, and he also don't have. At that moment, I was not a permanent resident. I was in a work permit. It was just the end of the world. I didn't know what to do.
When she was born in Cape Town, the Cuban government said that she cannot have Cuban nationality because her parents had been working outside of Cuba for more than 12 months. And in South Africa, one has to have a South African parent to be a South African citizen. So she doesn't have the nationality of either Cuba or South Africa. However, there is a provision in our Citizenship Act which says that if you are born stateless in South Africa, you should have the citizenship of South Africa. The Department of Home Affairs, however, has not implemented this section and refuses to in her case. And even though Lawyers for Human Rights has been successful in a High Court application to declare her South African citizenship,
the Department of Home Affairs is adamant in its stance and is now appealing her case at the Supreme Court of Appeal in Bloemfontein. It will be heard this month. Kenya did all she could to try and get her child documented.
Approximately 6 months to research by myself about the act. I read from human rights to whatever was available online, the Constitution of Cuba. The law in Cuba at that moment was not possible. That was law. But in South Africa, I found out that also part of the law is that exemption of the law. That if the person can prove that don't have the right to any citizenship, they won't let that child without citizenship. Oh, I was so happy. I went to Home Affairs, but nobody knew. The people by the counter is an exception. They don't know. But the lady that was in charge of the citizenship department says she's right. What she's claiming for, she has right to apply for. And then we started the process of application. What I got from Cuban embassy, and it's a letter that they wrote to me in 2010. Daniela was born in 2008. I got a letter that they addressed it to South African Home Affairs, where they state that by law, it was not possible for Daniela to be a Cuban.
The Cuban embassy declined our request for an interview on the grounds that the embassy does not make public statements on outstanding consular issues or relative to individuals. Desperate, Kenya sought help from Lawyers for Human Rights.
The human rights website, and I wrote to every email in that website. Somebody from Austria replied, and that person addressed me to a department in Pretoria that I didn't know exists. It's Lawyer for Human Rights. And from that time, they are assisting me with all the application of Daniela. They are the one that put that petition online. I really have support from them. Human Rights pay a buffet of lawyers, and they are just dealing with children like Daniela and also adults. It's not only children.
Don't know.
But what will happen when Daniela turns 18?
She won't be able to get to university without an ID. She's never going to be able probably to graduate 12 and get a certificate because you need to get in the system. She will never be able to get a bank account. And that is really scary. If tomorrow I am not around to support her, what will happen to Daniela? How somebody can prove Daniela is part of the family if I cannot prove she is my daughter? And that is really very scary. I don't let Daniela to go with anyone. She only go out with me and the father. Because it's difficult. She cannot travel. She's not free. Daniela is not free. At this point, Daniela doesn't exist legally. And that is what it is. She have a name, she go to school, she dream about her future, but where she can prove, if you go to work, they will ask you for your ID, your driving license, the bank account. Legally, she doesn't exist. She just exists for us. If I am not around tomorrow, I don't know. I am a very positive person. And I believe that God will never leave Daniela alone. But I want for her what she's entitled to. It's her human right to be belong somewhere. And nobody has the right to take it away from her or from any child. And that is the only thing I want for her. What she deserves as any human being.
This battle has taken Kenya 8 years, and it is still not over. Lawyers for human rights accuse the Department of Home Affairs of not responding appropriately to issues of statelessness in South Africa.
Well, I feel like Home Affairs still does not realize how big the problem is. And even though our birth registration rate in South Africa has gone up, since the amendment in 2014, we have seen a rise in the number of people with birth registration complaints at our offices. So my feeling is that this problem is going to get bigger. And even though it's still under 20% of the population who struggle with birth registration, those are the very vulnerable, marginalized people who need our help and who need Home Affairs' help. And Home Affairs will need to at some point realize that they need to do something about it and start implementing these sections in the Citizenship Act.
Vusim Kiza from the Department of Home Affairs denies these claims.
No, not that I'm aware of that we have ignored any case. There is no case that as a department will be tabled to us and we ignore it. And we would like lawyers of human rights to present those cases to the department. We've got the head of the department here where they can submit those cases. Then we can attend to them and be able to provide them with it. What type of a department will just ignore the state of such people? It will be unjust if we were to do that. All we are asking for is that lawyers for human rights, if you've got such cases, bring them to us, work with us, let's investigate them.
And I was asked to the Minister of Home Affairs, I remember when I was applying for Daniela citizen, a guy hung himself because he couldn't get an ID. And at that point, the minister was very, very shocked. I remember. And I thought to myself, have a person have to go so far to prove how important it is to be legally recognized? I'm not going to hang myself. I'm going to get my daughter's citizenship.
In 1975, Mozambique gained independence from Portuguese colonial rule. 2 years later, civil war broke out, and for the next 16 years, government soldiers were fighting as opposition, Renamo. This war saw many Mozambicans fleeing to neighboring countries. Julius and his wife Nora are among those who made their way to South Africa.
Loko va swi lavile u teke banga va ku khangi vo daya huku se ni swin'wana swa ku leswi a swi tirhi swibamu se ni loko leswi nga ta hi pfuna swi lava hi baleka se ni baleka ni ta fika tiko leri se loko ni fike tiko leri ku rhangeme ku nghena tiko leri se ni rhuma lava va ku tive ku yiva hala va ni lavele satelo wa me va ni landzela ye se va ni yivela ye va vuya na ye hi baleke xibamu.
When Nora tried to apply for refugee status at Home Affairs, she was told that her husband needed to be present.
Kusungula loko ni applyile e pass ku ve loko ni la ku apply va ku uni nuna ke no se loko ni ku ni nuna va ku famba u landzeni nuna wa wena ta apply emritu se kuma swa ku ile mapurasini a nga vuyanga se loko a vuya hi famba hi yale va fika va ku ina hi pfalile mapasi ya maputa ha tsalisi
se ni vulavurisana na vo se leswi mi ngo mi pfarile hi fanele hi hanyise ku yini se va ku nga hi vutisi tikhwenceni loko hi vutise tikhwenceni hi ta ku khoma hi ku rhumele Mozambique se ni vela no hlwelekisa sweswo ni ta ni vuya ku ta fika ni namuntlha ni sweswi a ni na pasi.
Life for this couple has been very hard. It has forced Julius to question his role as he cannot provide for his family and has to depend on his wife, a volunteer at a school near their home.
ID. So sava la kaya di tirin chomu no pukan tsama di fine lala. Anina ka kwetlela. Anina volo. So se makilwe yenu na wakola mti. Kuva swi boha leswaku me ni faneleke ni famba ni ndi ya lava ntirho ni supporta ye manje ko va volunteer aka la xikolweni se hi ye munhu muzana wa kona ni buka ye manje swa ni dya swilo swo sweleswo ku va ni nga kumi pasi.
His wife Nora feels insecure where she works as a volunteer and fears that she will be fired again.
Ni tirana ni rivala swa ku vela va ta ni khipa se vo va ni ya xemo ku ni twela loko va nga ri na swa ku ni twela ni fanele va ni khipile ni nga ha tirhi va ni tshamisize ku vona matirhelo ya me swa ku ni tirha kahle vela va ni khipile vo tlhava ni landza va ta ni teka ni muka na tirha hi ku vona matirhelo ya me swa ku ni tirha kahle a ni na nkinga ya ku pfa ni harasa nina va basisela kahle la xikolweni va twa va ri kahle loko ni tirha.
Julius says he wants to provide for his family, but without an ID, he feels trapped.
Andi ku mfumo wo loko u swi kota a wu ndi pfuni wu ni nyike pasi ni ta kote ku tirha na mina ni ta kote ku yaka la kaka mina kuma ka kwetlela a ni na ka kwetlela njhe nga ku xindlwana xa kwetele munhu lexi wanuna wa ku ringana na me a nghene entsongeni wa ku taniya i timhaka ka ni na pasi ni ta tirha kwihi loko ya hala va ri lave pasi u ya hala hi lave ID a yi kona se u ta endla njhani kinga ya me yi kwalani we maki.
Nora and Julius missed the deadline to apply for refugee status under Mandela's presidency, when African refugees were granted amnesty. They are at risk of being stateless forever if they do not return to Mozambique.
Mani nga ha swi naveli loko sa mfumo wa le Mozambique ku za ni ta fika la ndi yo baleka hi ku twe timhaka ta matshwange loyi se a fambaka hi xanisa se ni baleka menze ni ta fika etikweni se leswaku mfumo ni nga tala na hala ku vuyela le ya Mozambique kwala ni nga baleka kona me ku ya hi me a ni nga ha swi lavi
At the moment, people who fled Mozambique before the Refugees Act, because they came to South Africa before the Refugees Act was actually in place, and there's a huge gap there because a lot of people were never able to apply for refugee status, but lived here for a long time. And then the UN Refugee Convention also has a provision that says that we're supposed to naturalize people who have had refugee status and lived in the country for a long time. That option is not open to them. Under the current legislative regime, they can only return to Mozambique or live undocumented in South Africa as legal foreigners.
But what happens when a stateless person dies?
In that instance, firstly is because that person was living within a community. So normally death would be reported and would be taken by police. And Home Affairs is not involved in that particular process. But what we do as Home Affairs, if we are approached, then what we will have to issue, because it's important to register each and every death in the country, we issue a handwritten certificate, death certificate. But we are in a process of modernizing now so that it is also done systematically. But you will not have an ID number on that person. So you don't want you to be, but that person obviously, if that family around them does not have no one claims the body, then it faces what we call a pauper's funeral, which there is nothing we can do as Home Affairs.
Loko ilova, utoteka vachukumeta. Ukuna lexi xi nga ta endle. Futa kuna lexi xi nga ta pfuna muntu lo. Teka vachukumeta. A hi nga ta fana ni lava va nga vota, a hi nga ta fana ni lava va nga ni ma-ID. Loko ho mphuntela, vo teka vaakitiko vo teka va palatela la lahliwaka vanhu ko. Swi chipa. A ku na lexi nga ta sala xi pfuna vatukulu kumbe vana kwava. Vukisani na nchumu nga ta va nyika xona.
Meanwhile, back in Belfast, Thembi and her children continue to survive without a legal existence. There might, however, be hope for them if she overcomes her fear and presents herself to Home Affairs.
Thembi can be assisted firstly by making sure that she acquires a legal status in South Africa, because her children will remain illegal because she is illegal. So she has to take responsibility, even if her parents didn't help at that time and they've passed on. But Thembi has a responsibility to present herself to Home Affairs.